we go.
1970, a legally blind woman and her daughter would walk into the offices of child welfare authorities in Los Angeles County. As it transpired, the mother was actually attempting to establish a claim for benefits, but had inadvertently selected the wrong building due to her poor eyesight. While a receptionist provided the lady with the correct direction.
Look, I'm just going to say it. I'm going to say it right now. Now, before I say this, I just want to mention, no hate, no ill will. Is that his real accent? Let's go.
To the benefits office, one of the social workers noticed a number of strange things about the little girl who accompanied her. She seemed to be incapable.
I'm not watching it.
I guess my wife has seen this video.
Have you not seen it?
No.
Oh my god.
Is it messed up? Oh boy. All right.
Fully straightening her limbs and moved with what would later be described as a bunny hop, with her hands held out in front of her as if for extra balance. In addition, she appeared to be incredibly malnourished, and although the social worker initially believed her to be 6 or 7 years old, suffering from severe autism, brief questioning of the mother would reveal that she was in fact nearly 14 years old, completely incapable of speech, and was totally dependent on nappies due to the fact that she had never undergone toilet training. Her name was Susan Wiley, and her story is, without question, one of the most truly horrific examples of prolonged human abuse and neglect that has ever been documented.
Dude, I again, do I need to say it? This is why abortion should be legalized, chat, again, because it just got illegalized. Legalize it again. So we don't have parents doing this to their children. Because you guys want to know why a lot of parents do terrible things to their children? Because they don't want them. They thought that they were a mistake. They never wanted children. And now that they have one, they're just going to abuse the shit out of them. Sorry. I mean, you could put the kid up for adoption. And then what? Do you know how terrible that shit can be? How orphanages are, bro? Just put them, just have the child and then put them up for the adoption so government can't take care of them at all, and then they die from starvation or some shit. Come on, man. You guys really think the government cares about you? No. No.
Born in 1901, Pearl Wiley spent much of his early life in various orphanages across the Pacific Northwest. Very little
so he was an orphan.
is known about Pearl's father, save for the fact that he was killed by a lightning strike when Pearl was still a baby. Pearl's mother ran a brothel and had very little contact with him during the early years. This, coupled with her giving him a particularly feminine name, would lead to him developing extreme feelings of resentment towards her, and some psychologists who would later study the case have suggested that this may have been the root cause of his extreme anger issues later in life. As soon as Pearl turned 18, he would change his name to Clark. Clark would go on to find employment as a machinist on an aircraft production line both during and after the Second World War. After the war, he would meet and subsequently marry Irene Oglesby, a legally blind Dust Bowl refugee who was 20 years his junior. Although to everybody who knew the couple, the relationship seemed to be a good one, in reality, things were different. Shortly after the marriage, Clark began to isolate his wife from the outside world. He would prevent her from contacting friends or relatives and would frequently beat her should she attempt to do so without his
Classic
knowledge. Clark was always clear from the outset that he never wanted children, being so averse to any noise that he banned radio and later television from the house. It is indeed obvious that he was far from a prime candidate for fatherhood. Therefore, it's most unfortunate that the couple would go on.
Never wanted children. Never wanted children. Interesting. Interesting. Very interesting. All right. We're going to have to do it, chat. Wait. Oopsies. Oops. Oopsies. 1 second. We're going to have to do it, chat. Get castrated? Come on, guys. You really think they're going to make the sacrifice? You really think the man in the situation is going to make that sacrifice? There's literally relationships of dudes forcing their wives and girlfriends, etc., to get their tubes tied, which is way more damaging and way scarier than it is to get a vasectomy. But it doesn't matter.
To have 4 children. Sadly, only one of these children would survive to adulthood. Born 5 years into the marriage, Dorothy Wiley was the first of the 4 ill-fated children to be born to Clark and Irene. Amazingly, in spite of the fact that Clark regularly beat his wife throughout the later stages of her pregnancy, baby Dorothy was born completely healthy and, after leaving the hospital, traveled home to begin what should have been a long and happy life. However, Clark had other ideas. From the very first day, he would hit the child every time she cried, starting an unending cycle of abuse which would continue throughout the brief passage of this poor child's life. Baby Dorothy would eventually freeze to death 2 months later when Clark, unable to stand the sound of his daughter screaming, wrapped her in a blanket and locked her in a dresser drawer in the garage.
You know, regular parenting stuff. You guys know. You guys know this stuff. Regular parenting stuff. Thank you, Valentino, for the $10. Whatever content pig, keep it up. Any more bootleg movie reviews? Maybe, but probably not, because God, I hate reviewing those. I hate bootleg reviews. They're so hard and painful.
1 year after the death of her first child, Irene gave birth to the couple's second child, Robert Wiley. Unfortunately, Robert would pass away.
Wait, she actually died? Their first child died?
After only 2 days due to medical complications.
Hold up.
Born 3 years after the death of his brother, John Wiley also started life as a healthy child, and for some reason, possibly the fact that he was a boy, he was not subjected to quite the same level of abuse as his late sister. Sadly, though, John was still neglected, and this led to late development in talking, walking, and toilet training. When John was about 4 years old, Clark's mother removed him from the care of his parents, believing that Clark was mentally unstable and that John would be considered safer with her. If this had been the end of John's story, then he may well have gone on to lead a happy, healthy, and stable life. Unfortunately, this was not to be. At some point during John's 5th year, he was walking down the street with his grandmother to buy some ice cream when she was struck and killed by a drunk driver. John was forced to return home and live with his parents, and upon doing so, he discovered a surprise in the form of a new baby sister. Susan Wiley, later referred to as Genie, was born in 1957. She was the 4th and final child. Although suffering from some minor health difficulties, it appears that she too had the potential to grow up as a healthy, happy child. But once again, Clark would be on hand to prevent any such thing. At approximately 3 months old, it was...
Remember how in the beginning they literally said that he never wanted children? Why does he keep having them? Why do they keep having children if they don't want them?
It was discovered that Susan had a congenital hip dislocation, and this would result in her having to wear a splint for the next 9 months. Understandably, this led to delays when it came to her learning to walk, but Clark, whose mental health had deteriorated rapidly since the death of his mother, decided that she was mentally retarded and set about trying to isolate her entirely from the outside world.
Hello, everybody. Today
By this
we're gonna
point
talk
in the
about
story,
mystery
Clark
behind the deaths of one of the most famous artists in human history, Vincent van Gogh. Vincent.
Stop.
and his family have moved into his late mother's house. With Clark deciding to leave his mother's bedroom as an untouched shrine to her memory, Clark himself would sleep in a recliner in the living room, with Irene sleeping in a dining chair at the table and John left with the floor. Clark then had one remaining bedroom that he could devote fervently to the single goal of isolating his youngest daughter. This room was entirely devoid of any visual stimulation, with only a 3-inch gap at the top of the windows left uncovered to let a little bit of light in. Additionally, the furnishings consisted only of a toddler's potty chair and a cot with a reinforced lockable mesh lid. It was in this barren and chilling room that Susan would be imprisoned for the next 12 and a half years. of her life. Once everything had been prepared, poor Susan's ordeal truly began. Clark would keep her naked and strapped to the potty chair for up to 18 hours a day. She would only be released so that she could be restrained in a homemade straitjacket and strapped down into her cot at night. In addition to this, she was absolutely forbidden to make any sound at all, and if she did, Clark would beat her severely with a plank of wood. Perhaps
What? Huh?
the most informative and heart-wrenching description of her treatment is one that came from Susan herself when several years after she was rescued, she was asked to describe one of the memories that she had from the time spent with her father. Over the course of about 10 minutes, she provided the following words: father hit arm, big wood, Genie cry, not spit, father hit face, spit, father hit big stick, father is angry, father hit Genie big stick, father take piece wood hit, cry, father make me cry. I think anybody would agree that these 35 words provide more insight into
Dear
the
God.
horrific treatment of this poor, defenseless child than any description written by an outsider. Unbelievably, this is by no means all the abuse that she suffered. Clark would only ever communicate with her by barking and growling. He would deliberately grow his fingernails so that he could scratch her, and this would lead to a lifetime fear of clawed animals.
Why did you want just don't have kids? Maybe after you killed your first child, you would be like, man, maybe I shouldn't have children anymore. You know?
Perhaps even more disturbingly, he would force John, her elder brother, to participate in these torture sessions. He would also be forced to beat her if she made any noise, and when it came to feeding her the 3 bowls of baby food that she was given every day, Clark would force John to rub the remainder of her food in her face if she didn't eat quickly enough. Tragically, although he was treated far better than his sister, John also suffered terribly at the hands of his father as a child. Although allowed to attend school, he would be forced to go through a complicated process to verify his identity before Clark, armed with a loaded shotgun, would open the door and allow him back into the house. In addition, he was only allowed to communicate with his mother by whispering, and even this was only permitted if they were both in a separate room to Clark. Things would get much, much worse for John when he reached
How?
puberty. Adamant that he would not continue the family bloodline, Clark would frequently tie him naked to the chair and using the same plank of wood that he used to beat his daughter.
I genuinely don't like where he's going with the sentence. I don't like where he's going with the sentence here. I think I know where he's going with this sentence. And I don't want him to go there. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe he won't go there. Maybe he's not. You right? Maybe he won't say what I think he's going to say.
He would repeatedly bludgeon the boy's testicles.
He went there. Yep. Yeah, you went there. Oh, Lord.
In an attempt to sterilize him, John would go on to leave the house as soon as he turned 18, leaving Clark to focus his abuse entirely upon Susan. At this point, you may be wondering, what was the mother doing during all of this? Well, in short, the answer is nothing. During her trial, she would alternately claim that because of her blindness, she had no idea the full extent of the abuse that her children were going through, and simultaneously, she said that she was too terrified to leave because she had no other means of supporting herself or her children. A number of factors call both of these claims into question. Although undoubtedly terrified of Clark, when she did finally escape with Susan while he was out buying groceries, she did not go straight to the police, nor did she attempt to seek any medical help for her daughter. Instead, she elected to stay with relatives for 2 weeks before making the previously mentioned trip to the benefits office. Although this trip would ultimately result in both parents being arrested and charged with child abuse, Clark would never stand trial, as 15 minutes before he was scheduled to appear in court, he would take his own life with the very same shotgun, which he used to so fiercely guard his home against outside.
God, why, dude? Why do they always get off like this? These fucking cowards, man. This is always, like, they always do this shit. They actually get away with it. He got let off easy, man. Oh, God, that makes me so fucking mad.
Outsiders. He would leave 2 suicide notes. One was addressed to John and ended with the words, "Be a good boy, I love you." And the other simply read, "The world will never understand." Irene would be cleared of all charges and would continue living in the family home. And just a quick note here, although from this point onwards all medical and scientific notes refer to Susan as Genie, we've elected to continue using her original name as we believe that portrays her more as a real person and less as an object of scientific study. On the very same day that she was discovered, Susan was removed from the custody of her parents and immediately transferred to the Los Angeles Children's Hospital. And after she had been examined, the doctors labeled her as the most profoundly damaged child we've ever seen. According to information later published by one of Susan's original doctors, quote, "Susan could speak a few words such as blue, orange, mother, and go, but mostly remained silent and undemonstrative. She shuffled with a sort of bunny hop and urinated and defecated when stressed." In addition to this, due to the fact that she had only ever been force-fed baby food, she was incapable of chewing and could not swallow properly, which caused her to constantly dribble and spit. Interestingly, although she had pretty good eyesight, she was incapable of focusing on anything more than 10 feet away from her. It's believed that this is due to the fact that she never saw anything outside the confines of her room, so her long-distance vision never developed. Although doctors and psychologists were naturally appalled by Susan's condition.
That's crazy. Her long distance vision never developed because she was stuck in that room for so long. That's just so wild. What the fuck?
And they were also fascinated by it. To them, she represented the so-called forbidden experiment. There was very little research on the development of children in complete isolation for the obvious reason that there would be no ethical way to carry out the studies, and yet here Susan was, somebody who had already been subjected to such isolation. Just how much could be learned about childhood development if she was intensely
Eyes work
studied?
like that? That's what
The
I'm
National
saying. I had
Institute
no
of Mental
idea.
Health provided funding for research, and a team was assembled whose goal was to rehabilitate and study Genie's progress. It quickly became apparent that she was highly intelligent. Within a short space of time, she was able to master life skills such as using the toilet, dressing herself, and eating solid food. She became extraordinarily adept at nonverbal communications and would frequently draw pictures in order to explain things that she could not verbalize. She also made astonishing progress when it came to learning individual words, but even after 5 years, she was not able to put more than 3 words together and was incapable of understanding grammar, pronouns, or sentence structure. According to one of the linguists who worked with Susan, quote, "After beginning to speak in 2-word phrases, normal children experience a language explosion a few weeks later in which speech develops quickly. Susan never experienced such an explosion. Her speech seemed to plateau at creating 2 to 3 word strings, despite 4 years of additional work and research with her."
That's
This led
insane.
researchers to believe that although it is possible for someone who has been isolated from language to learn words and short phrases later in life, there's a certain point, believed to be about 10 years old, after which the brain is incapable of learning the complex structures of language.
I mean, I guess that makes sense because I feel like a lot of skills, if you learn them before you're 10 years old, then you can learn them really freaking fast. But once you're like past a certain age, it's harder to learn skills. Like me, you know, as like a 28-year-old dude, it's harder to learn new things. I do still try to learn new things, but it's a slower process, you know, to like learn a new skill or learn a new thing compared to a child.
Although Susan would make tremendous progress throughout this 5-year study period, spending the time in foster care with 2 different members of the research team, concerns were raised that she could not receive adequate
All right, that's it, chat. That's it. We're doing it. We're doing it. Sorry, guys. That's it.
rehabilitation whilst also being the object of scientific study. After the initial 5-year study period ended, funding was not renewed due to inadequate documentation of the findings. Susan would briefly be returned to the care of her mother, the very same woman who escaped prosecution by declaring herself incapable of caring for her. It soon became apparent that Susan's care requirements were too much for her mother, and she was moved to another foster home. In another heartbreaking turn of events, Susan would suffer further abuse at the hands of her carers. This included being violently beaten for vomiting, and from that point onwards, she stopped speaking and would eventually refuse to open her mouth entirely. After this, Susan was transferred to an undisclosed care facility, and nothing is publicly known about her life from this point onwards. In
Wow.
a 2008 interview, one of Susan's original carers said the following: "I'm pretty sure she's still alive because I've asked each time I called, and
I'm pretty sure she's still
they
alive.
told me she's well. They never let me have any contact with her. I've become powerless in my attempts to visit her or write to her. I think my last contact was in the early 1980s. I can get as far as the social worker in charge of her case,
Thank you, Derping USA, for becoming a member. I appreciate it.
but I can't get any further. We can only hope that wherever she is, she's finally living a life of peace."
I don't think she ever will. From that much trauma? How? How would someone be able to do that?
Now it's time to walk away. I hope you enjoyed your stay. Did you laugh or cry or maybe subscribed? I'll thank you either way. You know I will miss you. I hope you return. Tell your friend or your mother to get me more views, please.